Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, December 2nd around here, and we got to get to a lot of stuff. We have a ton of stuff to get to. We got two big-time upsets to start with. Michigan tops Ohio State again, and Miami falls out of the ACC title and maybe even the CFP as well. Then we'll get to a couple of ranked matchups from this week. Texas and South Carolina get big-time wins. Then we'll get to a little talk around all the different rivalries of the weekend. We got UGA kind of surviving in 8 overtimes. Notre Dame kind of survives USC just a little bit. And then you have Bama and Oregon kind of handling their business in big-time rivalries. We'll get to a little bit of Power 4 roundup, a ton of stuff to get to, including Penn State getting into the Big Ten Championship, Tennessee likely punching their ticket to the CFP, and much more. And then we'll get to the Group of 5. We'll talk about all the different matchups that are going on out there, and then we'll give you guys a little bit of update of all the championship matchups we have coming up this upcoming weekend. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, you can click that $, add any question, comment you'd like. It'll pop up on the screen, and we can have fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be as interactive as possible, so utilize that. Also, GSMCPodcast.net is up and running and does the exact same thing if you'd like to utilize that. But let's go ahead and jump into this thing, because we had a crazy weekend. There's no doubt about that. And we had two teams that kind of fell in the CFP race and definitely fell out of their conference title games. And we'll start with that one that happened over there in Columbus, Ohio, because how did this happen? I genuinely don't know what to say about this Ohio State team at this point in this game, because they just don't show up the right way. For whatever reason, I don't know what's happening in that locker room. I don't know what's happening with Ryan Day and the way they're going about this game. It's not right. There's no two ways about that. It's one of those things that is very, very odd to me. Every single year that they show up, it just feels like Michigan wants it more. It feels like they work a little bit harder. It feels like they push a little bit harder, and they tend to come out on top. And they have the last 4 years, and more than anything, it felt like it's something that I saw Tom Fornelli say. It's something that a lot of people have kind of echoed. It feels like Ryan Day wants to prove something in this game every single year. When they get into this game, it feels like the offensive attack really changes from the past couple of games or from the rest of the season, where they really want to run the ball. They really want to push it in between the tackles, because they've been told time and time again that they can't handle Michigan physically, and they're going to get pushed around and this, that, and the other. And it feels like they're overcompensating in the other direction. They're not utilizing the thing that makes them really special, which is guys like Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and all of the guys they have on the outside. That is what makes Ohio State Ohio State. That is what makes Ohio State different from what Michigan is, or from what a lot of teams out there are. But for whatever reason, in this game, they feel like they have to prove something. They feel like they have to show that they can handle them physically, that they can meet Michigan where Michigan likes to play, which is run the ball, play a little bit of line of scrimmage play, and then control the time of possession. You're probably not going to beat Michigan at that. That's what they do. They're not really going away from that. Now, the quarterback coming in, we'll talk about him a little bit later in the week, but the quarterback coming in could change that. But the reality is, you're not doing that right now. They got guys on both sides of the line of scrimmage that are going to play really hard. You have a banged-up offensive line, and they didn't play like it. They played like they had the best offensive line in the country, like they were going to win the Joe Moore Award, like it wasn't even a question, and they had been running the ball really efficiently the entire year. That was not the case. They've been running the ball well the entire year, but they also had 2 injuries on their offensive lines throughout this year, including last week to Seth McLaughlin, and they didn't play like it. And it was the most confusing way to go about business that I've seen in quite some time. Every single time, you felt like Ohio State understood that you're probably not going to be able to run the ball in this game. You're probably not going to be able to get down the field that way. They would run the ball again, and they would do it over and over and over again, and they did take some shots outside, and Will Howard made his fair share of mistakes, not necessarily taking any pressure or flack off of the passing game, but all this to say, they weren't running the ball in this game. They were not getting close to being able to run the ball in this game, and they just kept doing it, and they kept committing to this idea that they have to prove everyone wrong, they have to show everyone that they're tough, instead of just winning the football game. And I think that's something that's been holding them back in this game for the last 4 years, and it's going to continue to until they figure out what's going on in this one and how they want to fix it. But overall, I mean, it was just 60 minutes where Michigan won the day. Once again, for the 4th year in a row, they won the day. And after the game, they had the scuffle that went on, a lot of blame to go around in that. I feel like it's not really much worth spending too much time on. But more than anything, Ohio State had about 60 minutes to make sure that they didn't plant that flag in the middle of their field. So that's kind of period, end of story. Obviously, plenty of blame to go around to all the teams and a lot of different people in that situation. But at the end of the day, Ohio State, you had something to say about it, and you didn't during the game. But how Michigan was able to do this, I mean, the D-line absolutely dominated. It was something we talked about going into this game, saying they have to do that if they're going to be able to win this one, and they did exactly that. Only 3 yards per carry for this group. Didn't necessarily get to the quarterback too much, didn't have a sack in this game, but was really disruptive and caused problems for Will Howard and definitely caused a lot of problems for that run game, which we talked about was just not going on Saturday. And then Khalil Mullins carrying the load, as he has really all year for this offense, but 32 carries, 116 yards, and a score. That was about all they got offensively for a lot of the game. They got a couple of breaks defensively that put them in really good position. They kicked a couple of field goals, but at the end of the day, it was Khalil Mullins or pretty much nothing else for this Michigan team. I mean, their leading receiver had one catch on the day, so it wasn't necessarily a great day offensively, but they did what they do, which is suffocate you defensively and then run the football really effectively. And then they did confuse Will Howard. They got to Will Howard a good bit in this one. Both interceptions were just really head-scratching in. Pushing the ball downfield was just not working in this game. 4 for 10 on passes over 10 yards. He was 6 for 16 when he was pressured. It was a really tough day for Will Howard. Probably his worst performance of the year and probably the worst time to ever do it. So definitely a really tough day for this Ohio State Buckeye team. And where you go from here, I think if you're Michigan, puff your chest out. You have another 365 days to run circles around Ohio State, and you got the Bryce Underwood era on the way. So everything is coming up Michigan right about now. So you just got to go into this offseason, hopefully add a couple of difference makers on the outside, and then really attack next season and see if you can do it for a 5th time in a row. And then if you're Ohio State, you had 3 goals going into this year. It was to beat Michigan, to win the Big Ten, and to win the national title. 2 of those are out the window. With 1 loss, you have lost the Michigan game, obviously, and then the Big Ten championship, they will not be playing in it anymore. So you got to figure out what you're going to do. You got to win that. Pretty much, you got to win the national title. I think if they lose in it, then maybe Ryan Day sticks around. But if that 3rd one goes out the window, then it's very likely that Ryan Day goes along with it. So it's going to be interesting to watch this unfold. Not even just this week as Ohio State prepares for the playoff, likely the playoff, but as they get into that game, they might go on the road for that game. How do they handle all of that? It's going to be a really, really interesting thing, and it could be the end of Ryan Day's time at Ohio State. But we got to get into this one as well really quickly. Miami falls to Syracuse and falls out of likely the CFP, if I'm being totally honest. And it's funny because it's usually Miami coming back from a little bit of a deficit. Syracuse was down 21-0 early in this game, rallied back, and then it was kind of just a quarterback duel towards the end of this one. Cam Ward went for nearly 350 and 2 scores. Kyle McCord kind of one-upped him with 380 and 3 scores. So these guys were really, really incredible. We knew that they were going to be coming into this game. Just a couple more mistakes for Miami. The big one being Xavier Restrepo's fumble that led to Devin Grant's touchdown going the other direction, and it definitely put them in a weird position. It put them back in catch-up mode because they had just gotten a fumble from Syracuse. They had just gotten that turnover that it felt like they were waiting for, felt like they were really needed in this game, and then they gave it right back. And Syracuse took it back for a score, and now Miami was back in catch-up mode, and they just didn't have quite enough in the tank. And I think the big thing here, not necessarily the big thing, but as the finishing part of this game, I don't think it was the right idea to kick a field goal in that moment for Miami. The way Syracuse offense was rolling in, LaQuint Allen is a problem to get on the ground. I probably wouldn't have pulled the trigger there. I probably would have gone for the touchdown there and tried to be able to tie this game. The worst you do is you put them on the 10-yard line. You probably get pretty good field position coming back the other direction if you can get a quick stop. But I just thought that was a rather weird decision. Given the flow of the game, given the way Syracuse was moving the ball, I felt like it probably was the better decision to go for a score, and obviously they didn't get the ball back. So definitely a really, really tough situation for Mario Cristobal and Miami, and how Syracuse was able to get this done. I mean, there were a lot of mismatches on the back end, and it's something that's been kind of plaguing Miami this entire year, and it really came back to bite them in this one because Trevor Pena, Jackson Meeks were absolutely incredible. Both went for over 100 yards. Both had a score. In fact, Jackson Meeks had 2. He was an absolute problem. And then you had LaQuint Allen, you had Oronde Gadsden, you had tons of guys on the outside that were just kind of adding to the mix. It was an absolute drubbing for this back end for Miami, where it's been a problem the entire year, and you faced a team that can really throw the rock around. They absolutely did on Saturday. And then you kind of took the hit early. You go down 21-0 in a game that Miami really badly needs. You obviously really want it, but you don't necessarily need it. Would have been very easy to kind of roll up, say, okay, we'll get to a little bowl game. We'll see if we can get to 9 wins and kind of salvage this year. They handled that. Their defense was able to get a couple of stops in a row. They get 21 points back, and then you're right back in it, and you're playing on even footing, and then you get your foot out in front towards the end of the day, and Miami just did not really have an answer when that happened. And then kind of finishing the job. There were a lot of different things that happened in this game. I mean, Syracuse didn't even really run the ball all that effectively in this game before the very last drive. They went 8 plays that were all runs, 46 yards, and ate up almost the final 4 minutes of the clock. Really incredible job from an offense that was kind of tossing the ball around, wasn't necessarily going too aggressively in the run game, was able to kind of switch gears and say, we're going to run the ball now. LaQuint Allen's going to lead us to victory, and he absolutely did. He finished this off, and it was a really impressive performance from Syracuse, and it puts Miami in a really weird spot moving forward for the CFP because I frankly think they're on the outside looking in. I think for Syracuse, an incredible year for Fran Brown in year one. I mean, 9-3 is incredible, and a huge upset win to kind of finish it off. This feels like a program that's moving in the right direction. It feels like one that can build into something that could be really, really fun to watch. I don't necessarily know how long they'll be at the top of the ACC or if they're going to be able to, compete for it in 2025. I know they're going to be a problem for quite some time because Fran Brown is not someone that is going to let his guys show up unprepared, and they definitely didn't on Saturday, got a huge win, and then for Miami, you're on the bubble. And the way that I see it right about now is you're with the loser of the ACC championship. You better hope that it's probably Clemson if that's the case. And then you have Alabama and then Ole Miss. In my eyes, you got to just cross your fingers and hope you're on top tomorrow. I would be a little bit surprised if you were, but maybe you are. They've been ranking you pretty high in these rankings the last couple of weeks. Maybe you get the benefit of the doubt again. Maybe you're ahead of those teams, and maybe you're in the field as a 2-loss team. I'd be a little bit surprised, but maybe there's an opening there for them to kind of jump at. But it was an incredible thing to watch. Ohio State falling once again to Michigan, putting their season in a very weird place where you're not going to the Big Ten championship. You're going to the playoff likely, but maybe traveling on the road to a place like Neyland Stadium. Going to be really tough, no doubt about that. And I think you're in a position where as long as you don't go to the national title, you're probably looking for a new head coach. And then for Miami, I think you have a lot of questions. There's no doubt about that. You had an incredible year. Cam Ward's likely going to New York City for the Heisman ceremony, and you come up short again. Just a little bit short of the ACC championship. Have yet to win an ACC championship in their history in the conference. And you got a lot of questions asked, no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, you'll just hope that you're in the CFP and then maybe hope for a little bit of chaos that lets you in championship weekend. But definitely a missed opportunity for Miami as well as Ohio State. But let's take our first break here. And when we come back, we got to talk about 2 big-time ranked matchups. We'll talk about Texas getting a huge win in the rivalry that was renewed in College Station, as well as South Carolina winning the Palmetto Bowl and putting them kind of on that bubble with Miami and Alabama and a lot of other teams. But we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.